Hello YouTube, I'm back and I've got a very important skill for you to learn. It's probably something that you're already doing and you might not realize it. And it should be the first skill, maybe not the most important, but it should be one of the first skills you learn if you're trying to play the My Hero Academia card game or the Universus system in general, right? So one of the barriers, I'm putting air quotes around that, one of the barriers to entry for our game is the fact that there's so many abilities in play. It's the number one thing I've seen overwhelm new players, and it is probably the number one reason why even veteran players make mistakes, make misplays. Just the sheer inertia of tiny little things that you have to tell yourself, this doesn't matter now. This is when it will matter, and you have to remember that. You have to be aware of that, right? So I've got a couple sample build turns here, a little sample poke turn. I'm just kind of fishbowling my deck, right? This is like one of the things we do for playtesting, just to see what kind of hands am I gonna see, what kind of checks am I gonna make, things like that, right? So as we come in here to this turn, I've got a pretty decent build now passing to my opponent's turn. And so the thing that I'm talking about today, the topic of compartmentalization, we're now identifying what type of effects do we want to use on the opponent's turn? What type of effects are we trying to use now? In this game, there is a lot of cards that go both ways. There's a lot of cards that play offense and defense. It's the beauty of the system is essentially the risk reward, the resource management of, do I have to use this now defensively? If I don't, I'll have it for my offense. That's pretty awesome. Things like that, right? So probably the first outlier, the first really good example is Heroic Lineage. So this card is one of the better effects, right, on both offense and defense. It has the highest speed penalty right now, currently at -3 speed, shared with Specialized Sound or Specialist of Sound and Mediator. This is a card I almost never want to commit on offense. It's not a card that I'm compartmentalizing for my offense, but I am always aware that if my attack gets to where it's 2 points from being lethal, or however many heroic I have to remember that I can only turn this card sideways for the +2 damage for the second effect after my attack gets a speed bonus. So this is probably like the number one issue of compartmentalization I've seen just in the early game, because it's such an innocuous effect, right? It's such a normal sounding effect. But the -3 speed, I would have to say, is much more powerful in general, right? Because if I put you from 18 to 16, I'm going to end my turn, I tapped 1 foundation for that. It's not a bad rate, but the rate of turning this sideways for -3 speed makes it count almost like 3 foundations on defense. So in that respect, this is a card that I have compartmentalized into a very defensive card, right? I have made this my defensive choice. This is my speed hate of choice, right? So on my turn, I'm not really paying attention to it. When I'm attacking, especially early, I'm not really looking at this card at all. It's not really an option in my head. Every now and then, especially against like a 7-hander, if they take the first 2 kicks and I've got a pumped one coming in, now all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, we're getting to that situation we talked about where if my attack becomes lethal because of this, all of a sudden this becomes commit to make my opponent use a card. Like worst case scenario, they block, they use a resource. Best case scenario, we win the game. So when it goes onto my turn, I'm probably putting this card like off in a corner, especially if I'm playing in person and I rearrange my stage when I ready stuff, because I look at everything, I address, in my head, this is defense first, but I have to remember that this is offensive as well, right? And when it goes to my opponent's turn, I go, okay, this is a speed hate card. So I'm moving this over here. This is where my speed hate is gonna go. And I want this defensive response almost every turn. Almost every deck is going to pump damage at you in some way. Not to mention there are tricks to make you pump your opponent's damage. But so I want to make sure that this on my opponent's turn counts as 3 foundations. So I really want this up. So this is going to be something I don't commit on my turn unless I absolutely have. And then we've got Fulfilled My Duty, another card that can be used offensively very well. It can be used to deny your opponent their important defensive enhances, make it go straight to the block step, right? Very powerful ability. We've seen flash attacks that are really powerful. This can essentially destroy itself to turn your attack into a flash attack. But there are more offensive abilities in this game than there are defensive abilities. And I think a theme that you're going to see a lot when it comes to evaluating, at least personally, when it comes to evaluating cards, a lot of things that can be used offensively, you're kind of waiting until the right moment where you're going for a kill, where you're going for a lethal string. This is either going to get you to the lethal attack or it's going to be used on a lethal attack. This prevents your opponent from doing what they want to do on their turn. And I'm pretty sure most people see this as a defensive card as well. However, the way to compartmentalize this kind of card, the way that I personally, shuffle it in the back of my head is I want this to be kind of up front, up in center, mostly because I know it's already going to be like targeted for hate. It's already going to be one of the things that people like to commit, to flip, to seal, things like that, because they don't want to have their offense interrupted. Most of the advantage you gain in this game in set 1 format is from attacking. To do that, most decks need enhances. And so this is the kind of card that people can blow resources on to deal with your defense, to deal with you using it defensively early in a game, just to keep sort of the flow, just to get more access to what they're trying to do, even if it's not a permanent solution. So the main thing I compartmentalize is I'm looking for specific interactions. This card was just, okay, it counts as 3 foundations and it has a specific window when I can use it. So it's very easy to let Heroic Lineage kind of sit there and say, okay, anytime you get a speed bonus, almost like a psychiatrist, like a word association. If my opponent says plus speed, that's telling my brain, look at Heroic Lineage, think about it. This one, I have to think of specific attacks. One of the most common ones is if your opponent is playing a attack that destroys something and they don't use that enhance first, you can essentially choose to blow Fulfilled My Duty and make that choice for them. Not only do they not get their other enhances, but they don't get to choose what they blow up. So they had to essentially, again, you still lose one, right? But now if they blow one up first and you still want to end the enhanced step, now you have to go down 2. So that's probably like the #1 use I have for this card. My opponent is playing like a Gale Force Punch and they have to blow up 1 foundation to get below me to be able to blow up one of mine. I can blow this up. Not only do we go back to being equal, so they can't do it on the second one without blowing up more foundations, but I have essentially chosen for them that they get to blow this one up, and now we go to the block step. And so it an experienced player probably is going to use that enhance first, but those are the angles we have to take. Those are the things we have to be aware of, right? Is I'm going to say, okay, if my opponent plays a card where they draw 2, or if my opponent has some nasty combination, I'd say Fulfilled My Duty for me personally has probably done the most work against stun attacks that have other really good enhances. So like Electric Jolt, your opponent probably wants to play if it's completely blocked, it still deals 1 first, but a lot of people play the stun first. Stun is something that people have compartmentalized to be a really good first enhance because it immediately limits the options your opponent has. If your opponent has 3 playable foundations, they have 3 things that all do something really good, and they have the potential to play all 3 of them, stunning one of them has now locked them out of one of those choices, right? And with Fulfilled My Duty being an enhanced destroy, it's pretty often that stun can still punish that, especially again, if you're going for a kill turn, you don't really care too much about it still dealing 1 for jolt. Unless you're danky or you know, you're about to add it to momentum for dealing damage anyway. You know, if you're about to add it to your momentum through another effect, that's fine because it still goes face up. So we've got this card that we're looking for the specific, and this comes from deck knowledge. This comes from game knowledge, you know. But the card that this helps me out the most against is probably Pillar Swing. Pillar Swing makes the opponent choose between, okay, if they have a damage reduction effect on board, you might want to do that one first. If you're a deck that has, you know, damage reduction all over the place, that's probably something that they want to do first. But Stun is also really good. Stun 2 is a really big reason to play that card. So there I have to pick between that. But then the biggest highlight of the card to me is that it's an 8 damage attack that if my opponent doesn't want to take damage from, if they want to completely block it, it's going to leave my card pool and immediately become a resource. It's going to immediately become momentum. So they have to pick between those 3 abilities. And usually it's between the stun and the if it's blocked, it goes to momentum. But just having to pick between those 2 things can drastically alter the way a turn goes. There are turns where the kill condition isn't really Pillar Swing doing damage. It's forcing you to block Pillar Swing because it would kill you, and then using that momentum on the next attack or a later attack. So Fulfilled My Duty is a card that I compartmentalize with very specific attacks or very specific interactions between 2 enhances because you can interrupt it. And of course, Aida plays this really well, and Aida 1 dot, who can play the first enhance, probably compartmentalizes a little differently. There's a lot of scenarios where playing this as the second enhance of the enhance step, you know, after your opponent's already done their best enhance, the enhance on their attack usually, or their enhance on their character, you're kind of like, oh, okay, well now there's nothing else to really end the enhance step over. Whereas Aida gets to deny everything. So that becomes an even bigger choice to make. That's almost like another layer of complexity. So this is a card that I want to be upfront because this is one I can say, okay, if it gets speed, I'll remember Heroic Lineage. If it gets a bonus, you know, that's when, or if it gets a damage bonus, sorry, I said speed earlier. If the damage goes up, I mean, you also want to use it on a high speed attack too, right? Because if the damage goes up, but it's only like 3 or 4 speed, you're probably still not using Lineage. So it has to be both. But so this is when I can remember the trigger. I can compartmentalize the trigger. I can say, okay, damage bonus, Lineage. Damage bonus, Heroic Lineage. And I can kind of put it over in one side. This is one that because the effects are so specific, because the timing that I really want to use it is very specific. I want to kind of remember this one. I have to, because I'm going to be reading my opponent's cards and looking at my stage, right? So as soon as I read the nasty interaction I don't want to deal with, all my other cards are going to become irrelevant anyway, right? If I end the enhanced step, most of these cards are enhances. So it's immediately gonna fire off in my head that this is something to use first. And then we'll go over here to Mediator. Mediator is another card. It's situational, but it's not a response. And most of the time in this deck, it's just -3 speed. You know, the 1 diffs in the speed hate. You know, see, I've got the Night Watch in here. I am running Erase. You know, these are just really powerful interactions. Erase is a breaker block. Erase is sealing a foundation when I need it to, and it enables the eraser head foundations that are also really strong on board. But for this deck, it's pretty much just like a last-ditch effort minus speed kind of thing. And so I can also just associate it. I can put it in the compartment of speed hate. So this would go like over here. These are like, speed hate is not necessarily like your first go-to defense. It's maybe the most common defense. But because you're typically committing or destroying cards to take the place of other foundations, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a go-to first action on defense. I personally like to block a lot of things, and I do like to play it safe a lot. So I'll take a 5 speed down to a 2 or 3. You know, I want to be blocking on 3s and 5s. Whatever my lowest check is, and whatever my most common check. You know, I don't think there's any decks that are all 6s and all 4s yet. But so I really want to be blocking on 3s and 5s. And so that's when my speed hate comes in. That's when the math kind of goes, okay, will my speed hate allow me to block on a 5? Early game, I don't want to be blowing up my whole stage, but if I have to, that's what my speed hate is there for. And then we're going to hit Natural Leader. Natural Leader is another one of those things where on defense, this is about very specific interactions. I've probably already, when I played this card, when it first entered my stage, when my opponent's turn starts, my Natural Leader is like looking at their stage. I'm already zeroing in on what their best foundation is, what the foundation I need not to die to is, and I'm probably already associating Natural Leader with that. I'm associating it with a combination with like an attack plus something, right? So again, this is the kind of thing where, kind of like fulfilled my duty, I probably have moved this up. I've probably gone, okay, this is a specific interaction I have already dealt with once in this game, maybe in game 1, we're on game 2 now. You know, maybe I just know how my opponent's deck works. So when I play this card down, I have to go, okay, what does it do? Choose one rival foundation. Boom. I've chosen one in my head before any attacks have started. Now, again, this is, you know, the next level, the next step of the game is, of course, being free form and improving and things like that. When it enters the stage, when their card enters the stage, I'm already pairing this up. I'm already looking for this one foundation's ability during this other attack, right? Like if you've got first day of class is probably a really good one. You know, you're like, okay, well, they can only use it during their first attack anyway. And so getting rid of like that +2 bonus, the one that, you know, it's basically saying you can't fail your second check. I will commit one to put that risk, right? To put that fear into you. So looking for specific times when a card can't just be used on the next attack is also really strong. You know, looking for, I think in the next set's first impressions, right? Like any ability that says it has to be done during a first attack or during a combo attack, or you know that your opponent won't be using this later. That's another good way to pair this off, to compartmentalize that information. So now instead of looking at Natural Leader and going first enhance, choose one rival foundation, and you're like, okay, dude, let me read your whole stage, and all right, well, he can use this now, but he could also use this now. Okay, but this effect could be good here. Okay, but what if I do this on the next attack? You know, you should already have this paired off. You should already know the kind of interactions that your deck doesn't want to deal with or that you can't defend against. And compartmentalizing that information will allow you to pivot and make better decisions, even when you have to change the thing that you chose, when you're already zeroed in on stopping a specific foundation, right? And then the situation comes up where you now have to deal with a different foundation. You will have a better understanding of that because you compartmentalize the information and only focused on like one interaction. You will later be able to see, okay, this interaction isn't coming up anyway, and now this is the one that I'm afraid of, right? Like your opponent plays down another attack. And so it does have to be the first enhance. So that's another good reason to have already done that work, you know, to have already done the workload. So when my opponent's turn has started, I've already decided where 4 of my foundations are going to be used now, right? Like I've got this paired off for a specific foundation interaction. I've got this one paired off probably with a specific attack interaction or with an attack that uses a lot of enhances, right? And then I've got these 2, which are my speed hit. And so then villains defeated. This one's kind of weird. This one there's not a lot of discard effects right now, so you don't have to really like put that one in your head, but it's still good, you know, against cards like Hardened Chop. You know, you can tell yourself right now, basically, okay, this is Hardened Chop. Like if Hardened Chop comes up, boom, I have to remember I have a villains defeated, right? You can pair this off with specific discard interactions. And then the other thing you could do is you can pair this off with specific attack interactions. If your opponent plays an Electric Bolt, like we said before, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna do it can't be, or if it's completely blocked, it still deals 1, right? So they play Electric Bolt. That's their first enhance because they're afraid of you just ending the enhance. And that's telling you they need it for later. But so that can tell you, that can inform you, okay, this is a good attack to block, still take the 1 because you can gain 2 back and remove it from the game. And now it never goes to their momentum. So I have this in my head, you know, I can say, okay, again, this is just because the card pool is really small. And as you get more experienced, you have to like improvise or be more free form with your thinking. But in my head, I still go into it knowing these are the crucial interactions. I cannot stop Jolt from dealing damage. I cannot stop Zero Gravity Lift from dealing damage. So the way that I prevent them from going to momentum is by removing them with villains defeated. That means A, I have to be ready to block those attacks. They're not attacks that people commonly pump speed on unless, you know, it's EX for game with Jolt. And, you know, one's mid, one's high. So if I hold mid block and I know that interaction is coming, I don't have to read villains defeated unless those attacks come up. Now, there's a lot of other really good face-up momentum stuff, and you are always free to pivot, right? But if you think to yourself, oh, this is for Electric Jolt and Zero Gravity Lift because I don't want them going to momentum, and then your opponent plays a Meteor Shower or something and you can only half block it, right? That's yet another avenue where you went, okay, well, this is something that hates on cards going to momentum in this matchup primarily. You know, it does have other uses to remove attacks from the game, but the primary usage is to stop cards from going to momentum. This is my personal philosophy when I first started the game, is I needed to compartmentalize all this information. I needed to reduce things down to like 1 or 2 interactions. So I say, this is anytime a card is going to go to momentum and I don't want it to, even though I blocked the attack, this is where Villains Defeated comes in. So it's probably less common, depends on the matchup, depends on your matchup knowledge. This is a card I probably won't have to use too often. I can drop it, boom, down here, or maybe off to the side. And then Think Fast. This does basically nothing on my opponent's turn, so it goes with my Blink Foundation. So when I go into my opponent's turn, right, we're going to move this stuff around. And the most likely foundations I'm going to use is Heroic Lineage and Fulfilled My Duty. Natural Leader is pretty good too, especially like early turns where just committing one probably doesn't get you killed. Again, I say that with a grain of salt. You have to be very careful. But so I can now rearrange my staging area and I don't have to read everything. You know, I don't have to read every single foundation and wonder if it applies now. I just know that if my opponent plays a Pillar Swing, boom. If my opponent plays an Electric Jolt or a Zero Gravity Lift, if my opponent plays something that pumps the damage really high where I'm low on foundations, and whatever my opponent's best foundation is during their best attack or whatever attack it's appropriate, I now know that Natural Leader is already paired up with it. So that is the basics. Just a quick, a little example, I guess, a little rant on compartmentalizing early information. And then we would say, okay, they just build whatever. We're not going to go through a whole blocking step. But it comes back to my turn. I have a sweet looking hand here anyway. So I'm just going to draw my 2 cards. We're going to draw even more gas. But what do I need to do now? I need to compartmentalize my offensive information. So boom, we go back down here. We go, okay, if I don't think I'm going to kill them, but I do have some pretty decent speed. You know, I do have ways to put speed on my attack. I'm going to move this over to the side. This card's almost definitely not going to be used to draw a card. Again, remember, it's got that optional mode. If you've played an action card this turn, draw 1 card. It's not purely defensive, and it only reduces the speed on your rival's attack. So at worst, if we do decide to plus Ultra on this turn and we need to draw an additional card now for some reason, that's there. But again, probably not going to be used. Move that over. If my opponent's making me discard cards on my turn, more power to them. You know, again, this is probably not going to get used. But now, Think Fast, boom, this is our premier offensive foundation, right? It's how Zero gets speed and damage pump. It's one of the ways that we're going to trigger heroic lineage on any attack that deals that would become lethal. We don't have to commit the 1 foundation if we don't want to. We can just use 0 +1/+1, boom, +2 damage. And then fulfilled my duty is probably really situational here, but still very strong if we want to do play an attack plus ultra it, and then they get 1 enhance after that, right? They basically get to do 1 thing and then deal with this attack. So again, this is all situational, but on a turn 2, even with all this gas, I'd have to check pretty well to kill somebody. And this is such a good defensive piece. I'm still going to slide it off to the side. This is, it's so hard to evaluate cards offensively because it depends so much on the board state. And it's almost always better to save things for defense, right? It's almost better to, because these attacks do just fine on themselves. I don't have to put 2 speed to make any of these attacks look really good. But if we do get to the point, if we do get to a place where this and this is now going to bring us to a game-winning play, natural leader is almost definitely going to be really relevant. But again, it at the start of my turn, I'm pairing it up with now their best defensive foundation. And because it's a first enhance, it's better on offense. It does make it a little bit better, a little bit easier to use because they don't get the chance to just use the abilities on the chosen card before we do the first enhance. So this is the kind of thing where this is like mega situational, and the situations are almost all kind of the same. And I don't mean that in the sense that you're going to use them all in the same attack, of course. I don't mean that you're going to use them all in the same exact situation. They're situational all in the sense that I have to be able to present lethal, or else I am essentially using up these resources for just to pass the turn to my opponent. A lot of the early game is about getting something for nothing. You want to gain advantage by doing nothing. And that's going to be a topic that I probably talk about a little later. And so I hope that this helped. I know all my talks go longer than I want them to. It seems so very simple, but and again, this is probably something people already do. This is probably like, wow, why'd you waste your time on this? This is such a stupid topic. Who wouldn't look at a card and recognize, oh, this is for when speed hate is, or oh, this is for when you have to, end the enhanced step, right? But it's not really about recognizing what the cards do. It's about recognizing that I don't have to read them until this situation comes up. It's about recognizing that on certain turns, I need to have my autopilot turned on. I need to know which cards I want to play first and in which order. And that is informed by knowing which resources I don't want to lose right now. So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, it's just something I don't think I've seen other content creators talk about. I haven't watched, obviously all the new player onboarding content, but I have skipped around. I do check it out a bit, things like that. You can always learn something new. And I hope that at the very least, this skill has either resonated with the more experienced players, or this skill is going to help you in future games. If you find yourself sitting there reading all your foundations, or you find yourself in games where you go, oh man, I could have done this, I think that this was the first step for me personally. This was the first step for me in sort of getting better at the game and getting more fluid. I think a lot of the game is about experience. I don't think it's necessarily like this huge, big brained, really complicated game that a lot of people make it out to be. I think it's complicated because the layers are there in front of you. The layers are on every single card in your stage. Most of these cards have 2 abilities, and that can be overwhelming and that can seem complicated. But once you have successfully identified and sort of categorized these cards, once you have identified the situations in which you need to use them, the game becomes a lot more approachable. So thank you guys for listening. I know this went on way too long, way longer than I wanted to. Hopefully I edited this down to like 20 minutes or something, but so there you have it, guys. Compartmentalize all your information, compartmentalize which cards are needed where, and I believe you will see greater success in the future. Good luck with all your games. I'll see you next time. This is Ace Maneuvers. Goodbye, YouTube.